You want to see something spooky? It actually is pretty spooky, folks. NIH funding got cut. The indirect expenses. It's pretty bad. Some might even call it a massive crisis, actually. Cancer wins. It brings me no joy to announce that the war on cancer has been won by cancer. It's just a pro-cancer administration. I don't know what you want from me. This is going to affect science worldwide. Everyone here uses PubMed. Yeah, well, I use PubMed. Everyone, everywhere uses PubMed. It's really bad. Here's Trump explaining it.
Another cut that NIH put out a memo on Friday night. It's going to cut $4 billion from the percentage that they pay to universities and public colleges in all those states, not foreign countries. $4 billion. Is that okay to take that off the top?
Sure. It could be okay. I mean, you have to look at the universities. Some are legit. You could also say, why are we giving money to Harvard when it's got a $50 billion endowment? $50 billion. And yet they don't use that endowment to help their students.
This is for research, like biomedical research.
Well, that's fine. Look, we want to take care of research. We want to do a lot of things. But when you look at the USAID and you look at all the things and all the scams that was with, I don't have to go through it now, but I'll get you a little list, and you'll see one after another. There were very few legitimate. It was the opposite. Usually you find something wrong, like 1 out of 100, but this is the opposite. Here, almost everything was wrong. You find very few that were good, but there were some that were good.
How does this even help the capital class? I've got good news, question mark. It doesn't. Have they released any actual proof of scams or abuse from USAID? No. They just call anything fraud if they don't understand it or like it. And as it turns out, they don't understand and don't like everything. No, this doesn't help anyone. This is actually, it's incomprehensibly damaging. Right now, the NIH funding block has been frozen by a judge. Though keep in mind, of course, that thanks to the unitary executive theory, Donald Trump is eyeing the possibility of just ignoring everything judges tell him. So we'll see how that develops, you know? Yeah, a federal judge has blocked the cuts to medical research. Whether or not that's going to mean anything, I don't know. Might be an Andrew Jackson moment. Can't really say. You know, but the basic gist of it here, this is a basic summary, okay? Billions of dollars in cuts to biomedical research funding. Universities and research orgs are still reeling from the implications. The National Institutes of Health said Friday that it was vital to ensure that as many funds as possible go towards direct scientific research costs rather than administrative overhead. And this is the reason why I imagine they're cutting it, because usually, remember when he mentioned the like $50 bajillion Harvard endowment? When money goes to Harvard or to a bunch of like private research institutes, the money goes to administration, right? It just makes wealthy people wealthier. A lot of these grants from the NIH went directly to funding. So this money was actually used for the research. It announced all new and existing grants would be subject to a 15% indirect cost rate, a drastic cut in funding for universities in the middle of the academic year. The NIH said it would amount to a $4 billion in savings, significantly less than Elon Musk himself receives through federal subsidies, but okay. Scientists say the reduced federal support could have a devastating effect on critical research, shutting down clinical trials, labs, and experiments, and preventing life-saving breakthroughs in medicine. But critics argue the new NIH policy would bring sanity to a funding system rife with costs that should be absorbed by institutions. Thank you, The Washington Post, for whom democracy dies in darkness. I really appreciate this fresh perspective on the cancer winning. That's great. This is another example of how fascists take advantage of public distrust in liberal institutions, where Donald Trump is like, well, Harvard has enough money. And it's like, yeah, Harvard is a super corrupt institution. And a lot of these universities are basically just money-making schemes, built off of real estate speculation or athletics or whatever else. So they're taking this distrust, they're taking this like opposition to institutional bloat and corruption, and they're making it worse. They're applying the opposite of the solution. Even some GOP senators are pushing back because it hurts their states. It's pretty bad.
The National Institutes of Health is going to be cutting funding by $4 billion for medical research. The order by the Trump administration is taking effect on Monday. Now, locally, UCSF stands to lose millions of critical dollars. It's one of the biggest recipients in the entire country. But as ABC 7 News reporter Tara Campbell found out, the school is pushing back.
The Bay Area's medical researchers are bracing but not backing down as they stare down devastating funding cuts set to go into effect Monday. Friday, the Trump administration announced the National Institutes of Health will start limiting the amount of money it doles out for what are called indirect costs.
This is the worst place for them to cut as well, because biomedical research is often risky as an investment. You know, you don't really know what you're getting from it. It's kind of like how people credit Pfizer or Moderna or whatever for the COVID vaccines, when in reality, the base technology for it, you know, the mRNA vaccine was the product of public research and public spending, you know, a massive breakthrough in vaccine viability funded, well, by the NIH. Do you think we're going to be able to get quick vaccines to the next pandemic if these cuts keep up?
That cover the costs of things like research labs, equipment, and staff.
You're cutting off universities at the knees. You're not allowing research to continue. This is not how you conduct science.
Dr. Monica Gandhi is the director of the UCSF Center for AIDS Research. The university is among the top.
Well, this administration is ideologically pro-AIDS, so we you know, this probably played a role in their decision.
There's new alarm after the National Institutes of Health abruptly announced it will make cuts to biomedical research funding. Attorneys general in 22 states are now suing the Trump administration over the move, but it aims to set a lower cap on payments that universities rely on to cover overhead costs, equipment, maintenance, accounting, personnel. And while Republican senators have largely backed the Trump administration's moves to gut the federal government, what will happen when it hits their state's biggest employer? That is the question in the red state of Alabama, where cuts threaten the University of Alabama at Birmingham, which has received more than $1 billion in NIH funds in recent years. We're seeing similar funding fears in other states like Georgia, Nebraska, Wisconsin. Joining us, John Archibald.
It is so important when stuff like this happens. You have to hammer on the Republican voter over and over and over again, which is why the fell for it thing is so important. Because again, like, nobody wants this. Like, some people might be convinced that they want this because they're being like fed disinfo at a very high rate. You know, like they think the money that's being cut is all waste spending or whatever. But in reality, this is like anti-human. It's just it's like anti-life, you know?
Columnist at AL.com. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is on Capitol Hill. Tim Miller's back with us. In studio with me, Basil Smikle, former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party and an MSNBC political analyst. John, let's just sort of set the stage here. How large a chunk is that $1 billion for the University of Alabama, Birmingham? And what could be the impact if it does go away?
Yeah, it's huge. They're talking about $100 million a year, essentially, which is a lot of money in as you said, a deep red state.
It's kind of crazy how it's not actually that much money, right? Like, if you think about it, we're talking about kind of the bedrock of medical research in this country. And we are, of course, one of the top countries in funding medical research just by virtue of all the wealth that we have in this country. And it's like, that's not actually a lot, is it? You know, we're talking about marginal percentages of a, you know, single oligarch's wealth every year. That's great. That's great. Does this get us cheaper eggs? Well, in the sense that when more people die of preventable diseases, it'll lower demand for the eggs and therefore lower the cost. Yes. You're welcome.
A very Trump state right here in the Bible Belt that does a really terrible job of taking care of its sick people, with the exception of UAB, perhaps. But it powers the entire economy of the largest metro in the state. And there's been, quite frankly, a lot of silence about it.
Well, both U.S. senators from Alabama, Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville, I don't have to tell you, are Republicans. So they haven't had anything to say about these NIH cuts?
Katie Britt has hinted that the cuts should be considered carefully, which is, I guess, as good as we can hope for at this point. It was a pretty milquetoast thing. They're
going to end up selectively cutting them. They're going to be like Actually, we're selectively cutting the NIH so that only red states benefit from the indirect spending grants. Oh, it's going to be great. Yeah, just bolstering red state universities. I'm telling you, that's going to be the end point eventually. It's going to be like, for all like state disbursement, they're going to redirect as much of it to red states as possible, which is really grim.
Tonight, he hosted a group of Republican senators at his resort in Florida. He's trying to build congressional support for a massive bill to fund border security, keep the government running, and cut taxes. It comes as the president makes more controversial moves. On Friday, he said he had revoked the security clearance of former President Joe Biden. Now, Biden did the same thing to Trump after taking office.
Yeah, that's pretty normal. Kind of. Which 22 states sued? I wonder if any of them were red states. Probably not. The pause is limited to research institutes in the states that joined the lawsuit. Oh, nice. So the NIH spending freeze is still in effect, or the cuts, I'm sorry, is still in effect to the red states that didn't sue. Only the blue suits are getting the freeze and the cut. That's nice. We'll see if the federal government even goes ahead and obeys the judge's order. No. I think some of you guys are misunderstanding. The pause is to the cut. So the blue states are currently still receiving the money, at least theoretically. The red states aren't. Still kind of a you fell for it. Blue states stay winning. The vast majority of medical research in the U.S. is supported by NIH funding, which includes over 2,800 hospitals, medical schools, university, other research institutions. It's not good. This one is bad enough that it might actually get stopped. We'll see. We'll have to see. In North Carolina, the Republicans in the legislature haven't said a word about NIH funding, despite having two huge research universities, and are instead pushing to allow Bitcoin investment into the state pension. That's good. That seems like a good use of their time. Yeah, they're terrified of going against Trump. Like, absolutely terrified. Stuff like this is representative of the fascist incompetence that I've talked about, you know? You can only give so far in this direction. I guarantee you the red states that are most affected by this are not happy about it. How would the new reimbursement cap affect states that voted for Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election? I picked the 10 red states where Trump won at least 55% of the vote. That would see the biggest losses because of the cap. Texas, $333 million. Ohio, GAT, 171. Tennessee, Missouri, Florida, Indiana, Alabama, Utah, Iowa, South Carolina. You think we're going to see another exodus of medical researchers who are going to move out of red states into blue ones because the massive NIH funding cuts mean that there's no longer any way for them to sustain jobs? These cuts might end up applying to blue states as well. We don't know what's going to happen with the lawsuits. Red states may simply have no hospitals. Good. Dark woke. FAFO. Sorry. You voted for this. New accelerationist mindset. You. Unironically, like, if you are at these universities, if you're administration or anything, you need to be tying these cuts and everything that happens because of them to Trump as much as is possible. Oh, you can't get your doctor's appointment in on time? Like, it has to be delayed months out. Sorry. Loss of doctors due to Trump cuts. Trump cuts. No hospital. Trump cuts. No job. Sorry. Everything's now. Trump cuts. Put in a big sign outside the hospital. Due to Trump cuts, wait times may be longer. Trump cuts. Go for it. Yeah. We need the I did that stickers. Yeah, absolutely. Already seen that on eggs. We need to be a lot more vindictive, is what I'm saying. Way more vindictive. Whoever wrote this memo knows nothing about how rates are calculated, what is included in them, what the NIH is actually paying for. You cannot have medical research without buildings. It's just stupid. Fucking stupid. They can research from home. I could, but I am a different kind of beast. We need yard signs at least 2 foot by 2 foot and stick them next to all the gas station price signs. It's a little bit fucked up that Trump supporters will happily put Trump signs on their lawn like all the time, but people who are vindictive or don't like Trump or they're anti-Trump or whatever the like, they'll be like, no, I don't want to cause any trouble. Why do we cede so much ground to them? Like, by default, you know? I don't want to get shot. Yeah, but how likely is that really? I guess it depends on where you live.
They're interested in working for everyday Americans.
Thank you, Jeffries. As always, a beacon of charisma, optimism in these dark times. Billionaire Elon Musk says there's widespread fraud taking place in the payment of federal entitlements like Social Security. At this point, I am 100% certain that the magnitude of the fraud in federal entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, disability, exceeds the combined sum of every private scam you've ever heard by far. It's not even close. It is really crazy seeing him do the obvious thing we all knew he was going to do from the beginning, but without any self-awareness. Like, everyone knew from day one, oh yeah, they're going to cut Medicaid, Social Security, etc. Like, obviously, he's going to say, we found lots of fraud, and then never back it up, and he's just going to cut it. You know? It's not even interesting to talk about. I guess we'll talk about this when this actually happens, okay? Because in the meantime, obviously, this is all he's going to talk about, you know? I don't even understand what they mean by fraud. Fraud doesn't mean anything to them. By fraud, they mean something they don't want to pay out, and what they don't want to pay out is any money that goes to anyone. All this money should be going directly into Elon Musk's bank account. They have yet to prove any fraud from their USAID payment dissection. All the stuff they post that they claim is fraud is just stuff they don't like, or they're lying about it. Are right-wing people even going to accept this? Well, the right-wingers on Twitter, who are all just trying to make, you know, mucho money by, you know, farming blue check engagement, they'll go along with it. But the average Republican voter, dude, it's like your job is going to be to run out there and go, these are Trump cuts. Oh, you can't, you know, cash your Social Security check? That's Trump. Wow. Medicaid's broke? That's Trump, you know? You got to run out there and make sure everyone knows that. Because you know they're going to talk about how it's a temporary pause that they're doing while they evaluate what is or isn't real or what is or isn't fraud. And then they're going to say, oh, we're actually like reevaluating this, or it might take some time for the payments to come up online. Then they're going to be like, oh, we've discovered such overwhelming fraud that we have no choice but to reevaluate from the beginning this entire system. And Trump is going to fix it in his big, beautiful tax bill. So we all need to make sure the big, beautiful tax bill gets voted for. And then when the bill gets passed and everything's worse, it's going to be like, oh, because the Democrats did something, or maybe didn't do something, I don't know. You're running up against, you know, reality past a point. Meanwhile, thousands die from lack of resources. Yeah, well, just try to make sure that it's their guys and not ours, okay? That's why you guys need to engage in mutual aid, and the Appalachian grandmas who aren't going to be getting their medication, who did in fact vote for Trump as the last consequential act of their long and miserable lives, won't be getting mutual aid, you know? It is what it is. Hey, a lot of Appalachian grandmas vote blue. Do you mean a lot of in like an absolute sense, or is like a percentage? Because people seem to be legit panicking over this shit, not gonna lie. Well, yeah, if Medicaid and Social Security get cut, that would represent the early deaths of literally millions of people.